So I start the recording now. And that recording, I just want you to know before we get into the meat of things, we will be sending out a PDF of the slide and a link to the webinar recording within a day or two of this broadcast. So that will be available for you. That's available for all of you who are on the call today and anyone who registered. So if a colleague of yours registered but wasn't able to attend, they can get the slides and the recording, and it will also be posted to YouTube. And that goes for all of our webinars you can find on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in finding out more about webinars that we're doing and things that are upcoming, for example, we are thinking of doing a Siemens webinar, Siemens-focused webinar in the next couple months here. You can check out and follow our LinkedIn Spotlight page for Kepware product training, and that's on LinkedIn on our company page. So go ahead and follow that page if you're interested in upcoming webinars. All right, so for those of you who are on the call, there's a lot of people on the call. We are not sure if you know Kepware well or not. So just to set the frame for everybody, we're going to do a brief introduction to Kepware, the company, and who we are. We're headquartered in Portland, Maine. We were established 2 decades ago, and we got our start in discrete manufacturing and automation and control software specifically for discrete manufacturing. But then over the years expanded into all different markets, all different industries, and as you can see from the map here, all over the world we have partners and users and just a really great customer base. We are still headquartered in Portland, Maine, although we do now have an office open in Japan and a few remote employees working for us all over the world. So, feel free to contact us in any way to learn more. We have 4 software products, and the one we're going to focus on today is called KEPServerEX, and it's what we call our communications platform. This is what, when you purchase a driver from us or you're trying to get connected to a PLC or to a database, KEPServerEX is what you would use to facilitate that connectivity. So it has a library of over 150 protocols that it supports, and it's all integrated into one single software install. So here's the little, what we call Lego or brick that we use to represent the functionality of KEPServerEX. On the bottom in the green there, we have what we call our drivers. You can connect to PLCs, controllers, RTUs, DCS systems, databases, and the list goes on and on. Like I said, there's 150. We pull that data into our communications platform, KEPServerEX. It's a single user interface. It will model that data in a unified way and then just provide that data connectivity up to the layer in yellow, which is what we call our client interface layer. And we can convert that data into OPC, into ODBC for SQL databases, into measurement data for our EFM exporter, simple network management protocol, SNMP, and as we're going to talk about today, into REST and MQTT through our IoT Gateway. So the idea here is that you're centralizing all your information. That has many, many advantages. It simplifies your automation architecture, reduces network traffic, decreases potential device and system resource usage. And it's really easy to use. It's really easy to start up and go. I'm one of the main trainers here, and a lot of the people I train are just self-taught. So there's lots of tools that are easy to use, like device discovery and automatic tag generation to get you started. So before we dive into the meat of the material here, I actually want to know, are you currently using our software? So to give me a frame of reference for who's on the line and whether or not you are using the software, when I go through the demos and when Eric goes through his portion of the presentation, are you currently using Kepware software, or are you just kind of exploring with us right now? So I'll leave that poll question up for another few seconds to give everybody an opportunity to answer. The question is, are you currently using Kepware software? You can answer yes, no, or maybe you're unsure, you don't know. So a few more seconds for that question to make sure everybody gets a chance to answer, and we'll move on. And I see that people are using a questions pane here to ask our application engineers some questions, so that's great. Again, we have application engineers available on the line to answer your questions if you have those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and share that data with you. So it does look like large majority of the people on this call today, almost 75%, 73%, are using Kepware software. So that's great to see, and we're really happy to have you on the line and have you engage with us this way. So I'm going to hide that, and before we move on, one more question. Since the majority of you are KEPServerEX users, how experienced are you with the software? So 1 would be no experience whatsoever. You maybe have purchased it, but you've never set it up, all the way up to 5, where you might consider yourself an expert. So 1, no experience whatsoever if you are configuring KEPServerEX, and 5, being an expert. So I'll let that poll question go for a little bit so you can answer that. And again, 1 would be you have no experience whatsoever with KEPServerEX. 5, you're an expert, and we got almost 90% people voted now, so I'll close this out in a couple seconds. Great. Thank you for answering that. So it looks like we got a pretty good spread here, pretty even across the board as far as experience level goes. So we'll be sure to try to hit, information for the people that are more experienced that's going to be useful for you, but also maybe give a little context for the people that don't have any experience when we dive into the demos and explain some of the features of our software during the webinar. Great. Well, thanks so much for participating in those polls. They really help us tailor our content during these webinars, so we really appreciate it. Wonderful. Well, let's dive right in. So this webinar is going to give a high-level overview of the new features and products in KEPServerEX v5.19 with a big focus, a lion's share of this webinar being focused on our IoT Gateway. Before we dive into that, let's just talk about some general enhancements and updates that have gone on with v5.19. So v5.19 officially supports Windows 10. We've updated it. Our Allen Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet driver now supports ControlLogix firmware versions 26 and 27. We have an enhancement to the ODBC client driver, which we'll get into more details in a second. And we have an additional scan mode called Respect Tag Scan Rate. So that's very interesting. I'll explain that more. And finally, this might please a lot of our general user base, some enhancements to a license utility to help you recover broken licenses. So that's the functionality. That's just general. Again, I'm going to go through the last 3 bullets here in a little bit more detail. I'll have a slide on each of them. And then, like I said, we're going to jump right into the star of the webinar today, the IoT Gateway. So major addition to our product line. This new advanced feature is part of Kepware's plan to support what we call the Industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT. And it streams real-time machine and sensor data into browsers, cloud-based software platforms, anything you want really you can get directly from the server as long as they're enabled with these certain protocols we're going to talk about in a moment. And like I said, Kepware's product manager, Eric, has joined us for this webinar, and he's going to cover a few things about the gateway. He's going to give us some background on industrial IoT. That'll give us some context to the product and why we developed it. Then he's going to give us a product overview, talk about the features of the product and how it works. He'll present a use case, which is really interesting about a customer that's already implemented this. And then he'll flip it back over to me. I'll do a really fun demo. I think you guys will like it a lot. And I'll talk about licensing and give you some extra resources if you'd like to learn more. Like I said, before we get into that, let me just briefly talk about some of the enhancements we made with this release. So I said there's an enhancement to the ODBC client driver. The ODBC client driver allows you to interact with a SQL database from KEPServerEX. And what we did is we added support for an execute statement in your query access method. So from the ODBC client driver, you have the option to perform a query and query a database and return data from that query directly to KEPServerEX. Before we supported things like the select statement, the select command, and now we support the execute command. And we also added this execute tag that is a read-write tag. You can write to it, execute that query on demand anytime. and leverage this execute to maybe execute a stored procedure by setting the parameters in that stored procedure to certain values. So could be valuable for those people that are using our database connectivity options. The next big thing, and for those of you who maybe have been in my training classes before, this might be big news for you. This is a respect tag specified scan rate enhancement in device properties. So in device properties, there's a scan mode option. So basically when you're setting up connections to devices, you have an option to say override the client specified scan rate, because by default, whatever the client, which is the HMI or the SCADA application connecting to us, whatever it says, however fast it says to scan the devices, that's what we respect. That's what we do by default. You do have options in KEPServerEX to override that. You had these 3 options here prior to v5.19, and now new in v5.19 you have this override option, respect tag specified scan rate. So if you go into tag properties or the properties of the items that you're reading from those controllers, there's a scan rate. Prior to 5.19, if you had an ODBC client connected, this scan rate meant nothing. It in no way applied and in no way affected your device communication. Now in v5.19 and higher, respect tag specified scan rate, if you have that selected, we will default to the scan rate in tag properties, which means you can specify on a very granular level, tag by tag, how fast you're scanning your data. So that's quite a convenient feature, and I know for some of you that I've trained that that is functionality that you've requested in the past. And finally, enhancement to the license utility. So the license utility previously to v5.19, if a software license was broken, that activation ID, that license would just disappear from the license utility. But now what we do is we actually still display that license and give you a status and let you know that it is broken and some indication of why it is broken. And so we added those enhancements, view details on why the license is untrusted and broken, and also there's now a repair button that actually lets you initiate repair of broken licenses if it's possible for you to do the repair on your own from the licensing utility. So I'll just briefly show you what this looks like. I'm in my license utility right now. And I don't have anything licensed, but if I go into the help file here, you'll see a screenshot of the enhancement where here we have an activation ID that is broken, and it's broken because of a broken anchor. And so I could come in here, select that broken activation ID, click repair, and I would get instructions on whether or not I could repair that on my own, or if I would need to call tech support and get their help to repair that. So I know that's, provides you a little more visibility on your licenses and is a convenient feature that many of you have requested for some time now. All right, so that is it for me for just the general enhancements. We're going to move on to Eric now, and he's going to talk to us about the IoT Gateway, background on industrial IoT, and I'll let him take it away.
Thank you, Joanne. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to learn more about our latest product release. We are very excited to talk with you all about IoT and the direction Kepware has taken with this new advanced plugin for KEPServerEX. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Dellinger. I am the product manager for our IoT solutions. I've been with Kepware for over 14 years and have spent the last 2 years working on our IoT initiatives, which also includes the industrial data forwarder for Splunk, which we released last year. All right, so let's talk about the industrial Internet of Things and how we fit into this new and exciting shift in the industrial market space. The industrial Internet of Things is about smart connected operations, connecting dissimilar networks, devices, protocols, and applications. It is sharing and connecting this data with anyone and anywhere, and then turning this data into actionable information used to make specific business decisions. Excuse me. As the IoT market has started to mature, we've been approached by countless people who want to simplify getting access to real-time, edge-based industrial control data. With the new IoT Gateway, we can make this industrial data we already collect, available to a much broader audience of users and applications. These applications can be big data sources like Hadoop located on Amazon's AWS, or IBM's Bluemix platform or Microsoft's Azure, or they can be a simple web browser hosted locally. Vendors and end users alike are beginning to recognize the value of integrating industrial control data across their organization. This is going to allow them to create new insights, and it'll enable decision makers to anticipate and take action on those new insights, creating new revenues and new cost savings within their organization. What we did was we took a look at the most widely adopted APIs and protocols within the big data and analytics industry, or within IoT. And with our IoT Gateway advanced plugin for KEPServerEX, we focused on open source technologies already adopted by most of the big data vendors and applications that are already on the market. This will allow us for wider adoption, easier integration and implementation, and will accelerate time to value for everyone. With the release, we chose to focus our efforts on REST and MQTT for data exchange, and we chose JSON for the data format. In regards to real-time for big data and real-time data for big data and analytics, we recognize that we could potentially be sampling data from industrial equipment at a much higher rate and then we would need to publish the data. So we built in store and forward, where we'll be able to store and limit the amount of data in memory and publish the data in blocks. So basically holding that data until you're ready to publish it to the cloud. And lastly, the protocols can be secured with HTTPS using SSL for REST and TLS for MQTT. Now I want to talk a little more in depth on the technology in our products. What I'll demonstrate here is a basic layout of KEPServerEX's technology stack. What you'll see in green is what we've considered our core platform for the past 20 years. At the bottom layer, you'll see connectivity. This represents our library of 150 communication drivers that connects to thousands of industrial devices and applications, including PLCs, PACs, RTUs, MES, and SCADA, just to name a few. This second layer represents how we transform the data from all the disparate and proprietary sources into a common namespace, such as tag address name, value, timestamp, and quality. The third layer, analytics, this represents our advanced tags plugin, which can allow you to measure the duration of operations, totalize events, and perform aggregates on the data. The scheduling layer is represented by our advanced scheduler plugin, which allows users to override client communication requests and move the scheduling of device and tag data requests into the server. This will enable users to optimize their network and device communications. So if you have multiple clients connecting to KEPServerEX as your data aggregator, you'll be able to limit the amount of bandwidth that these clients are putting on the server. The scheduling layer is represented by, I messed up there. The last green box in the upper left represents our industrial control applications that are traditional consumers of Kepware data. This is the pipe for applications to connect and consume Kepware data. To date, a large majority of this connectivity has been OPC DA and OPC UA. And lastly, what you see in yellow is what we've just released in version 5.19. We have developed 3 agents, an MQTT client to publish data to an MQTT broker, a REST client to publish data into a REST server, and a REST server for bidirectional communications. As I mentioned earlier, these 3 agents, while not supported today by most of your traditional MES and SCADA applications, are widely supported by big data, enterprise, and analytics applications, not to mention your simple web browser that everyone's using today. If you're not familiar with these technologies, here are a few points to get you started. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is a client-server model. It leverages HTTP and HTTPS. The HTTPS utilizes SSL for secure data exchange. And it is stateless, which means each request contains the appropriate information to service that request. Each request is an independent transaction and which utilizes a request response methodology. Applications supporting requests include your common web browser. A lot of the big data and analytics solutions out there support REST, and many of the new IoT platforms also support REST. MQTT stands for Message Queue Telemetry Transport. One of the major differences between this protocol and, say, REST and OPC is that it utilizes a publish-subscribe methodology. Data sources like KEPServerEX will publish to an intermediate broker. Consumers of the data will subscribe to that broker in the data that they're interested in. The broker will then forward the data to the consumers who have subscribed to the appropriate topic, which would be defined by Kepware. This protocol leverages TCP/IP. It is a lightweight protocol and also uses transport layer security, or TLS. Applications supporting MQTT include Amazon's AWS, IBM's Bluemix, Microsoft's Azure, and a number of analytics applications. There are also a number of open source MQTT brokers available, products such as NoDread, Mosquito, ActiveMQ, and many more. Excuse me. With these new agents, we needed to standardize the data payload for the data, and for this we chose JSON. JSON is a human-readable format that most applications can consume. However, even with this JSON format, there is not a standard way of formatting our industrial data. So we created a tool that would allow you to modify your JSON payload to best suit your application's expectations. We continue to maintain flexibility while deploying KEPServerEX. Whether it's a greenfield or brownfield project you are involved in, the IoT Gateway solution, like all Kepware drivers and plugins, can be implemented to meet your requirements. The gateway can be installed on an existing installation of KEPServerEX, or it can be deployed separately as a data aggregator for device connectivity, or a gateway for collecting data from multiple OPC servers that already exist on your plant. Throughout the development of these new agents, we worked closely with several end users that helped us ensure we were developing a product that would solve their real-world problems. The one I want to talk about today is a US-based components manufacturer called Mclean Fog. They were very instrumental in providing real-time feedback to us as we were developing the product. They have 3 divisions with 34 manufacturing facilities and over 3,000 employees. This was a significant undertaking for Mclean Fog, and they were really looking for a connectivity solution that would help increase their time to value as they deployed this overall solution I'll present. When we started talking with them, their first comment was around the lines of, we have little to no automation and we need to find a way to automate our data collection and move this data into our ERP solution. Their employees were doing non-value added activities such as weighing product, manual reporting on piece counts, and rework. They were blind to several key performance indicators such as machine efficiency, machine downtime, and defect rates. And they knew they needed to improve the amount of excess inventory they were manufacturing, reduce the number of quality issues and rework they were doing, and reduce the long lead times their customers were experiencing. What you see here is their basic system architecture. Starting from the center, you will see the actual manufacturing process. With Kepware, they were able to connect to their industrial equipment to start collecting data. They chose ActiveMQ for their MQTT broker. Using Kepware's IoT Gateway solution, they were able to publish that machine data to this broker. On the other side of the broker is a product from Microsoft called BizTalk. This allowed them to subscribe to the MQTT broker and then seamlessly move that data into their JD Edwards ERP, really for inventory management, product planning, and reporting. As a result, Mclean Fog was able to utilize many benefits, including automated data collection, no more clipboards, which was really great. Near real-time reporting, improved machine efficiency, improved machine uptime, reduction of defect rates, and shorter lead times for their customers. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Joanne to cover the demo, licensing, and additional resources. If you have any questions regarding IoT, our IoT roadmap, or the IoT Gateway we just released, feel free to email me at the above email address. So thank you for your time, and back to Joanne.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Good presentation. Hopefully that explained a lot for you about the background of this IoT Gateway plugin again, and the REST and MQTT protocols that it supports. And we'll get right into the demo, and I'll show you how those can be leveraged in your IoT Internet of Things sort of world. We got some really good questions coming through, and I think probably some people are playing Stump the Application Engineer a little bit. So keep on sending those through. So for example, Jesse says, did I just see that IoT will allow KEPServer access from any computer on the network? That's always been possible with our OBCDA interface and our OBC UA interface. You can always access our data if you set those up correctly from any other computer on the network. This is another way to do it, and I'll show you how you can actually access IoT data or data in KEPServerEX through the IoT plugin from a web browser in a minute here. Great. So here I have a demo running on a VM here, and you see I have what we call our SimDemo Project. This is a project that's installed on every clean install of KEPServerEX. It's just a simulator driver, and basically what it does is it uses the computer memory, the PC memory, to simulate 16-bit and 8-bit devices and basically implement storage for those devices. And it also has the feature of being able to generate functional information, so algorithmic data like a ramp, random, a sine wave, or a user-defined function that just rotates through a string, a comma-separated string of values, in order to simulate data through KEPServerEX if you don't have a PLC connected. So we use this in a lot of our demos and work just to simulate a PLC in case we don't have one connected. For those of you who are new to the server, this is our configuration window. This is where you set up a project for KEPServerEX. You'll create a channel, and at the channel level you'll choose a driver. So the driver might be Allen Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet, or IC6870, or ODBC client driver, or Modbus, or Siemens, and the list goes on and on. Once you choose that driver, our wizards are going to walk you through setting up a channel and then a device to connect to the specific CPU or target controller or target device data source that you're trying to get data from. And then you'll create tags that represent the information in that device. So it might represent the different register memory that's in your controller. It could represent I/O that's connected to your controller, and so on and so forth. So just a little bit of background there. I've modified this simulation demo product very slightly from the one that's installed with KEPServerEX by default. I've changed this tag 1 here, channel 1, device 1, tag 1, to a string address, and that's going to come into play in my demo in a little bit, so I just want to highlight that because we'll see how that works into the demo in a little bit. So here I have, the config window. This is how I connect to my devices. This is how I tell KEPServerEX to connect to the devices. I don't see data from this window. In order to see data, I would need to connect a client. So that might be an HMI, or that might be a SCADA system, or as we'll see in a minute, it'll be a browser. And from the drop-down menu here, I can select my IoT Gateway. If you don't see the drop-down menu and you don't see the IoT Gateway, you're just going to have to go through Modify your install and be sure to go to the Plugins section and be sure that everything's selected under the plugins there to get the IoT Gateway installed. So I click on that, and I'm brought to this view. And Eric talked to you about agents. I'm going to click to add an agent, and I have 3 agents I can choose from: MQTT Client, REST client and REST server. So the first one we're going to go with is REST server because that's really the simplest to set up. So basically I'm going to set up a REST server, import tags in a minute, and be able to see data from that REST interface. I click next here. I have some options. I can leave my network adapter as localhost, which means I can just host this URL local to this machine. If I did want to get this out over a network, I'd want to choose a network adapter, and obviously this IP address will change so that people on other machines or applications on other machines can access my data. I'm going to leave this as localhost. Our default port is 39320. I'm going to leave that as well, but that is configurable. And for this demo, just for ease of setting it up, even though I have the option to use HTTPS, I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm going to allow anonymous login. I could layer in security with a login if I so wished. I'm going to click Finish, and that's all I need to do to set up my REST server. It was very simple. If I right-click on this and get back into Properties, I can go back anytime and edit these settings as far as the URL here. In fact, I'm going to take this and copy this right now because I'll use this URL in a minute. And then the tab that shows up in Properties that you didn't see in the wizard is this Licensing tab. We'll talk about licensing in a little bit, but licensing is based on an item count, so per item for the IoT Gateway. Right now it's not licensed, but if I was licensed, it would show me how many items I could put into my gateway and how many items I have in the gateway currently, and whether or not I'm at risk of bumping up against that license limit. So I'm going to click to add IoT items. Once I click that, we open up our browse pane here, and I can browse through. I can include system tags if I'm using another plugin, or if I want to pull in system information like the system time. I can include those tags as well. For this, I'm just going to use my simulation examples, and I'm going to choose a ramp tag, ramp1, random1, sign1, and user1. So just 4 tags that I'm going to add, and my server is going to pull to populate the REST server here. So scan rate, that's how fast my server is going to pull those items. So how fast is this going to check those items for updates, and it's going to be set to 1 second by default, or 1,000 milliseconds, and I say OK. And here I am. And so pretty straightforward to set up those items. Now, what I need is a REST client to be able to read these items. And a really popular REST client is just a web browser. I prefer Chrome. You can use Firefox, Internet Explorer, any browser you prefer. They're all REST clients. So now that URL I had copied from earlier, just going to paste that Control V into my browse pane. So you see I'm targeting the local host through the port 39320 with that custom URL IoT Gateway on the end. And if I hit that, I'm hitting my REST server. So you kind of get this, quote unquote splash page once you have that set up, that interface set up. And it gives you tons of information about how you can interact with our server and get data from the REST interface. It gives you access to our product manual. So if I open that, you'll see tons of information about how to set up not only REST server, but all the other interfaces. So lots of information available on setting this stuff up. And then it gives you information about interacting and how the API works. So, just like you're used to on the regular web, the REST server supports certain methods for accessing the data. So for example, here we can append a browse to our URL up here, and that'll act as an HTTP GET. And so if I actually click on this is a hyperlink, it'll show me and it'll browse my REST interface, my REST server interface, and say, okay, these are the items that are available: ramp1, random1, sign1, and user1. And I'm actually going to copy this user1 ID. I'm going to Control C because I'm going to need that in a moment. But it just shows me, okay, these are the items that are available for you to read. So if I go back and I scroll down a little further, now we see that I have an option for reading. So I append read to my URL, and I could, supposedly read this data from KEPServerEX. So I can click on this example here, and you'll see it's channel 1, device 1, tag 1, and I'm getting this kind of error message that says false, and the reason is that the tag is invalid, and I get those for both of those tags. So the reason that those are invalid is because channel 1, device 1, tag 1, and tag 2, I didn't add those to my REST server interface, so they're not available over my REST server interface. So what I need to do is come up here and put in an item ID that is available, which is that user1 tag that I had copied from earlier. So if I click enter, now I get S is true, so I'm reading data. No reason is blank because we're successfully reading data. And I'm seeing values. So if I refresh, I get my data, and it says, hello world, this is a test. Great. So I'm reading my data. Eric earlier, he explained that JSON format. That's what you're seeing right here. This is the JSON that's very easy to parse, very friendly with any tools that are used to using, HTTP or REST protocols. This JSON format is very friendly and easy to use, and I'll show you an example of parsing it in a moment. So there you go, reading KEPServerEX data information, PLC information from my web browser. Pretty fun stuff there. It gets better though. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a new agent, and this time I'm going to add a REST client. So my REST client it supports two methods. It supports a post and a put. So if I had a REST server, I could basically post information to that server for the server to consume. And again, I'm targeting localhost here, port 3000. I'm going to change this to 1880 for a very specific reason. We'll see in a moment. And then I'm going to append a unique URL. I'm going to call it IoT Gate and copy that. Little append URL there because that'll come into play in a moment when I set up a REST server to receive this data. Again, my publish rate, I'm going to set this to 1 second, so that's how fast I'm going to publish to that to my REST server once I set it up. From a REST client perspective, I have an option of specifying a custom HTTP header if I need that, and then I click finish. Again, I can right click here and get into properties and see, okay, here's my endpoint. I can modify that at any time, modify my header information, and even change what the body of the message will look like. So right now we send an ID, value, quality, timestamp across the wire to that on the REST client side. That's what we're posting, but you can change this format if you so wish. We can also layer in security, username and password, as well as we have our licensing view to see how many items we're using. So I'm going to add some items. I'm going to add ramp2, random2, and sign2. And I'm going to scan those items at 1 second and check for updates. And I'm only going to send updates through my REST client interface if the data has changed. So here are my 3 tags. Now, how am I going to read this information? Well, I am going to use something called NoDread, and NoDread is a super friendly tool. It can basically act as a HTTP server. It's going to catch the information from my REST client. And NoDread is a visual tool for wiring things in the Internet of Things. So you can wire together hardware devices, APIs, online services in new and interesting ways, and of course you can wire in KEPServerEX into this tool. It is open source, and it's been implemented by IBM Emerging Technology Organization, and it's really fun to set up, easy to set up, fun to play around with, lots of documentation on it. And so you can see here I can send, through my nodes here, I can send emails, I can output files, and we'll see how this comes into play in my demo in a moment. So here I have an HTTP input node, and I can use this to get the information that's being posted by my client. So I'm just going to delete that node because I already have one set up here. I have my HTTP input node. I'm using that appended URL IoT Gate, and you'll notice that NoDread is already pointed at the local host through port 1880. So that's why I chose port 1880 a moment ago. And then I'm just going to point it towards that IoT Gate in order to start receiving the data. All HTTP requests need a response, like an acknowledgement. So I put a HTTP response node in here to handle that. And so if I deploy that and turn my debug on, I should see, there we are, data coming through in the debug view here coming from my server. So here, again, it's in the JSON format. And I see only if the data is changing, I'll see updates for ramp2, random2, and sign2. So all my information coming through, once I pull it into this NoDread system, into this IoT system, I can do anything I want with it. I can parse it, I can send it all different places, and I'll show you once we get through the last agent, I'll come back and explain this little part here, which will kind of be the best part of the demo. I think it'll be a fun part of the demo. Before we get there though, I'm going to turn this off, and I just want to show you our last agent. So I'm going to click to add a new agent, and I'm going to add an MQTT client. So I'm going to target the localhost 1883, and my topic is just going to be IoT Gateway, so I'm just going to leave all these default settings and change my publish rate to 1 second. Again, MQTT follows a publish-subscribe model, so I'm going to publish these updates to a broker. I'm going to use Mosquito as a broker, and then I'm going to be able to grab them from an MQTT, another MQTT enabled client. So there is MQTT, MQ Telemetry Transport Protocol, just a lightweight method of carrying out messaging in a publish-subscribe model, as Eric talked about before. We do have a knowledge base article on setting up this Mosquito system I'm going to use as an MQTT broker. So you can reference that on our website if you so wish. I'm going to click Next here, and I have an option to provide client credentials if I so wish, and Finish. And really that's all I needed to do the MQTT setup. So if I get back into properties here, I see I can edit those properties as well. I'm going to add some items. So click to add IoT items, functions, and here I'm just going to add all the 3s. And my scan rate 1 second, and only publish the data changes. And if I go down to my little console here, I see this is actually pointed at my Mosquito interface here, my Mosquito broker, and I can see those data updates live coming through the Mosquito broker. So that's great. I know I'm getting data and it's going to my broker. I'm going to get back into NoDread. NoDread also conveniently has an MQTT node. So I can use NoDread's MQTT node. The topic is IoT Gateway, and it's already pointed towards that port 1883. And if I put another debug node in here and deploy that, I should be able to see all my data coming through. So user 3, ramp 3, random 3, sign 3. As the data changes, it's coming through my NoDread here. So, NoDread might seem intimidating, or hopefully it's interesting and fun for you guys, but it's a super easy way to get data in from your server and manipulate it in interesting ways. So I'm going to stop that. And one of the interesting ways I'm going to show you in a moment is how you can parse this information coming from the IoT Gateway. And what I'm going to do is parse the information coming from my REST client, and I'm going to actually send it to Twitter. I'm doing that just because it's fun for the demo, but notice that, like I said, from NoDread you have email outputs, file outputs. So you could be parsing this data from KEPServerEX and sending it out however you so wish. The way I parse this data in NoDread is with a function that I've developed here I call my tweet function. And here I have, basically I'm saying, okay, I'm going to take the payload of the message that KEPServerEX is showing me in that JSON format, and I'm going to look for an ID channel device 1 tag 1. And I'm going to take the value of that tag and append hashtag Kepware training onto it. I'm going to create a new message called tweet, and in the payload of that message, I'm going to send that out at the output of the node and send that out to Twitter. So pretty simple code here for those of you who aren't shy of a little bit of development. You can see it's 20 lines, not a lot of code to be able to get that value, append a string here, and then I'm going to send that out to my Twitter node here. I'm just connected to Twitter ID @Kepware Training that I created specifically for these demos, and we'll see how that tweet comes through. So I'm going to turn on my tweet debug, and before I can send the tweet, I do need to add that channel 1 device 1 tag 1, which again I changed to a string, to my REST client interface here. And so I have tag 1 there, so as soon as I start sending this data, and you see it just came through string 1 #Kepware Training, because by default this tag is set to string 1, I get an output. So now I'm going to use my quick client just to change the value of that string. The quick client is just a quick way to read and write data from KEPServerEX local to the machine you're on. So I'm going to go hello world. And I apply that. It accepts my write, so I can see here my write went through the server. I see the write came through with the #Kepware Training appended there. And here is my Twitter feed. I'm scanning Twitter for the #Kepware Training, and you know, when you try this out yourselves, you can do it too. So here's string 1 #Kepware Training came through 55 seconds ago. Typically takes about 30 seconds. There we go. Hello world of V519 rocks, #Kepware Training. So pretty powerful. You know, I was able to set up this NoDread functionality here less than a few hours to get this tweet functionality going, and very powerful. You know, I'm able to take data from anywhere that's networked and connected into KEPServerEX and push it anywhere. So pretty fun to play with, and I've had a good time building these demos for you. That is it for the demos. Please continue to pump through those questions if you have them. Our application engineers are still there to answer them. And now, without further ado, we're just ready to wrap up with some of our licensing and resource info. Okay, so licensing. Licensing is in 5 tiers. The first tier, the lowest cost tier, is 1 to 500 tags. So up to 500 tag items you can have going through your IoT Gateway. And the highest tier is up to 50,000. So please call our sales team, go to our website for pricing. I do want to note here, as far as dependencies, the IoT Gateway is dependent on Java. You need Java 6 or higher for that to run, and you might have noticed that in my demo. If you look at the event log messages here, you'll see that it gives you some indication that you're running with Java, and if you don't have the right version of Java installed, it'll give you some messages there to indicate that, and then our help file has a link that will link you to where you need to go to download that Java install. Resources, tons of information out there about this IoT Gateway. Aaron Semley, he wrote a white paper on IoT protocols to watch that gets more in depth about these protocols we've been talking about and really examines them and talks about ways you can use them. Knowledge base article on setting up that MQTT broker, it's called a Mosquito, and I showed you that during the demo. So setting that up, pretty straightforward. Knowledge base article on that. And then, of course, like I showed you in the demo, those help files that are online, you can grab them and set up any of these agents however you would like. So, of course, it wouldn't be, you know, a webinar without more poll questions. So now that you've heard about this functionality, now that you know what it is, I want to know, do you have an existing business need that could benefit from this product? So now that you've seen how it works, you've heard Eric's use case about Mclean Fog using this with Microsoft BizTalk and the MQTT broker. Is there an existing business need, you know, maybe just simply hitting KEPServerEX with a web browser that you could see using this product for? So I'll leave this question up for a few seconds. Hopefully you can answer. So I'm going to leave this up a couple more seconds. Do you have an existing business need that could benefit from this product? All right, thank you for voting. So it looks like we're pretty evenly split between the yeses and the people who are not sure. So good to see that the people who just say flat out no are low. And hopefully through exploring some of these features, downloading the demo, again, you can download the demo, fully functional. The only restriction is a 2-hour demo timer that you can reset every 2 hours. So maybe convert some of those unsures. So by playing around with it, you can figure out if it'll be useful for you. Okay, great. So next thing, just in your questions pane, chat with us. Do you have any software applications in your current environment or that you're planning for that you think this IoT Gateway would hook into seamlessly? Like Eric's example was Microsoft BizTalk. There's software like Azure. Is there any software applications that you have that you think that you'll be able to hook in to this IoT Gateway? So I'm getting some great answers. SPC, analytics data, get data out of a SCADA system, databases, that's great. And then what data would you be most interested in collecting with this tool? Okay, great. So answers still coming through for the first one, a Drupal app, that's great. Wonderful. And I see, what data would you most be interested in collecting this? So some people said database data, so that's great. Someone said they'll be using this with VMware, vSOM. Great. Okay, well, thank you for those answers. That's very helpful. And again, if you do have an existing need, Python, that's great. Thanks, Jonathan. E1, great. So someone says they use E1, they're going to replace it with this. Possibly use as a kind of middleware between SCADA and business systems. Wonderware historian. Okay, great. So lots of a real-time web dashboard from Andrew. That's a great application. Okay, good. So this is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that information with us. Continue to tell us this information as the webinar wraps up here. And if you're interested in utilizing this functionality and want to learn more about how you can set it up, please contact our sales team or our training team. We have applications engineers on board ready to help you set up this information. So to conclude, we had those enhancements we talked about at the beginning. Support for Windows 10, support for Allen Bradley control logics, firmware 26 and 27, enhancements to the ODBC client driver, the respect tag, scan rate, scan mode, and enhancements to the licensing utility, and then of course that really nifty IoT gateway that, if you so wish, you can be publishing your process data to Twitter. So this is the question of the day. To wrap it up, one last poll question here. Would you like to use the new features and enhancements in KEPServerEX version 5.19? So yes, the IoT Gateway, or maybe some of the other enhancements we talked about. Windows 10, the firmware for Allen Bradley control logics, those updates, ODBC client driver updates. So please answer this as the last poll, so answer this question before you leave. Would you like to use the new features and enhancements in KEPServerEX version 5.19? And I'll leave this open for a few seconds. And of course, the first one is the IoT Gateway, but maybe some of those other minor enhancements also caught your fancy and is something that you would want to use. And this is a multiple select answer, so you can select multiple things here. And if there's something else you'd want to use that's not in this poll question, you can type it into your little chat pane and let us know. Okay, so I'm going to close this poll now and share these results with you. So it looks like majority of people said yes, the IoT Gateway, so that's wonderful, but some solid interest in the other enhancements that we made, so that's great to see. Upgrading, some of you might be wondering about that. It is free to upgrade to 5.19 if you're under support. If you're unsure whether or not you're under support or whether your license is valid for version 5.19, you can simply go to your My Kepware page, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Go to your My Kepware page, and you can enter your activation ID or your license ID in this update eligibility tool, and it will tell you whether or not you're eligible for the v5.19 release. It was released on October 20th, so as long as your license is valid past that date, you can get the 5.19 upgrade. Resources. So if you're interested in more training, we're going to start kicking off training next year in March, so you can get your requests in early if you so wish. Other webinars, videos, demonstrations, tons of content up on YouTube, including this webinar will be up there once we get it all pressed and uploaded. Updates, again, follow our Kepware product training spotlight page on LinkedIn for upcoming webinars and events. And we also have a blog. There's a blog on the IoT Gateway that just got published, so you can go to our blog and see that information as well as a ton of information about the company up there. Contact information, Eric gave you his personal email, eric.dellinger@kepware.com. Sales, training, technical support, we're all available, happy to answer your questions. And I think that probably wraps it up here. Again, we recorded this. We will be sending out the recording and a PDF of the slides. So you'll get all the links that were in these slides. All the contact information will be in the PDF that you'll receive as a follow-up. All right, so we are right on time here. Eric, any other?
No, thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great. So we'll have the apps engineers stay on the line here for a little bit longer to answer questions, but that's it for the scheduled content. So feel free to log off